Alrighty, welcome back to another thrilling episode of Wuxia Wednesdays. I'm your intrepid martial brother Fraggith, and today we're going to be reading more of Legends of the Condor Heroes 1, A Hero Born by Jin Yong. Previously on, um, so the Seven Freaks of the South found Guo Jing in Mongolia. That's good. Um, He's pretty slow on the uptake, and they try to teach him a couple kung fu tricks, and he really can't pick them up because he's too dumb. We're gonna be honest. He's not very bright, sadly. He's very earnest though. Um, so they're like, well, it's okay. It'll just take us a while. You can show that you are earnest about doing this kung fu learning thing with us in order to help get vengeance on the man who killed your dad. By coming at midnight onto this mountain over here, and we'll teach you a couple things, even if it takes all night. So the night comes, and time's passing, time's passing. He still hasn't shown up. And then suddenly, the Seven Freaks of the South realize, oh shoot, there's a bunch of piles of skulls around. I wonder what that's all about. And then the eldest of the group is like, oh, uh, we need to get out of here. Well, you all need to get out of here. I need to get vengeance. Um, because this is where Twice Foul Dark Wind are hanging out, which are this pair of married kung fu practitioners who uh, are named Cyclone Mei or Iron Corpse and Hurricane Chen or Copper Corpse. And they're a very nasty duo. They know what is it, nine yin something or other claw, I think, and basically they're using people's heads as bowling balls, punching holes in people's noggins. Nine yin skeleton claw, yes. Um, and they killed Ken Gene's brother Kei Bichie, who doesn't matter. Keijene does matter because he's one of the Seven Freaks of the South. He's the blind one. Um, and so Cyclone Mei shows up first, and so they're fighting her. They're fighting her, and they manage to blind her. Um, but not before she summons her brother. Sorry, husband, Hurricane Chen, who shows up and takes Guo Jing hostage. Um, and then gets promptly shanked in his most important vital point by Guo Jing, largely by accident. But Guo Jing is like, I'm scared. I have knife. I poke. And gets him right in his most important vital point, and he dies. Just like that. This guy who has killed hundreds, dozens to hundreds of people is offed by some, you know, small child. Um, as is the way of things. Uh, so the Seven Freaks of the South are like, let's get out of here. And unfortunately, they haven't had it all their own way because between the two of them, between Cyclone Mei and Hurricane Chen, um, they lost, I think, Zhang Shang, whoever the butcher was. I think that was him. It wasn't Wood. I don't think it was Woodcutter Man. Let me see here. Does this say? Yes, Zhang Sheng, who's been secretly in love with Jade Han, the woman of the group. Um, so he's dead, unfortunately, uh, which is a shame. So I guess that pretty much picks us up right where we were. And we can get cracking onto Chapter 5. We're making headway. Alrighty. Give me a sec here to water up, and we'll get moving with the grooving. What? Chapter 5. Draw the bow, shoot the condor. 1. The freaks were descending the hillside. What? Oh, that's an editing goof. Cool. So it says the freaks were descending the hillside by side when they heard the roars of a wild beast up ahead. So hillside is one word, and it should have been two. The freaks were descending the hill side by side when they heard the roars of a wild beast up ahead. Rider Han snatched up his reins, jumped onto Windchaser, and spurred him on. He veered into the distance and spotted a crowd gathered together. He pushed on a bit farther until he could make out what had drawn their attention: two leopards clawing at a dead body. Rider Han edged ever closer. It was Hurricane Chen. Zhu Kong drew up level with him. He looked as fierce in death as he had done in life. Had it not been for Guo Jing and his dagger, they might not have been standing there to witness this spectacle. The leopards began eating the corpse. A small boy on a horse called to the leopard handlers to pull them away. He then turned, and then on seeing Guo Jing called out, "So this is where you've been hiding? Too scared to help Tolui fight? You call yourself his friend?" Guo Jing recognized him. Sengum's son, Tusaka. "Have you been beating Tolui again? Where is he?" Guo Jing said. "I'm taking the leopards to feed on him now. Surrender, or else I'll set them on you too." But the sight of Guo Jing's companions was enough to hold Tusaka back for now. "What about Tolui?" Guo Jing asked again. "Let the leopards eat him." Tusaka spurred his horse and led the leopard handlers away. But one of the men spoke up. "Master, that boy is Temujin Khan's son." "Why should that frighten me?" Tusaka replied with a crack of his whip. "I can do what I want. Come now." The leopard handler dared not disobey his master and followed. But the other handler knew this could bring him trouble. "I'm going to tell Temujin Khan!" He called and ran. Sorry. Tusaka did not stop him. "Fine," he muttered, "but I'm releasing the leopards on Tolui all the same. By the time Uncle Temujin comes, it'll be too late. What's he gonna do then?" He whipped his horse and forced them on. Guo Jing's concern for his friend's safety eclipsed even his fear of these awesome beasts. "Shifu," he said, turning to Jade Han, "Tusaka is going to release the leopards on my sworn brother. I've got to warn him so he can get away." "But if you follow, the leopards might get you too. Aren't you scared?" "Yes." "And you still want to go?" Guo Jing hesitated for only a moment before answering. "Yes." He then turned and began running as fast as his legs would allow. Zhu Kong was still in pain and draped over his horse's back. He looked across at Guo Jing and said, the boy is not the most intelligent, but he's brave all the same." "You're right, second brother. We must save them," Jade Han replied.
"If that little boy keeps leopards, he is surely the son of... Oh, If that little boy keeps leopards, he is surely the son of someone very important, Gildan Quan began, trying to sound a word of caution. We'd best not cause trouble, especially as 3 among us are injured. But Rider Han was on his way, and, using the best of his lightness kung fu, had already swiped Guo Jing up and onto his shoulders. Guo Jing felt as if he were flying. Rider Han ran back toward Wind Chaser and, in one move, jumped up and into his saddle. Moments later, they were level with Tusaka and the leopard handler. Up ahead, they caught sight of Tolui, surrounded by a gang of a dozen or so older boys. Tusaka had ordered them not to let Tolui escape. Tolui had spent the night practicing the 3 moves Zhu Kong taught him the day before, but when in the morning he had been unable to locate his sworn brother, Guo Jing, nor persuade his brother Ogadai to help, he had gone to face Tusaka alone. Tusaka, in contrast, had backup in the form of 8 loyal friends. He had been surprised to see Tolui come on his own, and when the boy had asked that they not attack all at once, Tusaka had agreed out of pity. The boy could not possibly win, after all, but Tolui's moves beat each of Tusaka's gang one by one. They were classics of the empty palms boxing, and Tolui was quick to learn. Now he needn't fear any of the other Mongolian boys on the steppe. Tusaka was knocked down twice, once from a punch square on the nose. Furious, Tusaka had gone to fetch his father's leopards. Tolui, meanwhile, stood proudly, glaring at the boys he had just beaten. There he had remained, unaware of the imminent danger. Then, in the distance, he heard Guo Jing's calls. "Tolui! Tolui, run! Tusaka is coming with his leopards!" Fear shot through Tolui, and he tried to escape the circle, but the boys would not let him out. The rest of the freaks of the south had followed behind, and they came thundering toward them, followed by Tusaka and the leopards. They had decided not to stop Tusaka, preferring first to assess if Guo Jing and Tolui were in danger. At that moment, the drumming of hooves echoed around them. "Don't release the leopards!" A shout broke through the noise. It was Temujin's 4 great generals. The rogue leopard handler had reached them and told them of the news. They had ridden straight over while the handler continued in search of the great Khan. Temujin, Ong Khan, Jamuka, Sengum, and the others had been conversing with the Wanyan princes back at the camp. They rushed to their horses at once. "Send word! Tusaka must stop! That is my order!" Ong Khan said. "Temujin Khan's son must not be hurt." Wanyan Hongshi was much excited by these latest developments, particularly after the disappointments of the night before. "Let's see what's going on!" he cried, getting to his feet. If Sengum's leopards kill Temujin's son, his brother the 6th Prince of the Jin mused to himself, then a rift will grow between their families, and they will probably end up at war. Fortune smiles upon the Jin Empire, if not upon the Mongols. The Jin princes followed the others to the scene of the dispute, only to find the leopards already unchained. The beasts were crouched and ready, their throaty growls reverberating around the crowd. And there, standing before them, were Tolui and his sworn Anda, Guo Jing. Temujin and his 4 generals aimed their bows at the leopards, their gazes fixed. Temujin knew his son was in danger, but these leopards were Sengum's most precious possessions. He had caught them as cubs and raised them into the fearsome animals they were today. As long as they did not attack Tolui, Temujin would do his best not to have them killed. Tusaka looked over at the crowd, which now included his doting father and grandfather, and grew in courage. He ordered the leopards to attack. But his grandfather was most displeased. "Stop this at once!" Ong Khan cried. Once again they heard horses' hoofs, and a beautiful chestnut horse came galloping into the camp. It was ridden by an older woman draped in fur. In her arms she carried a young girl. She jumped down. This was Temujin's wife, Tolwe's mother. He had been chatting with Sengum's wife in the camp. She had been chatting with Sengum's wife in the camp, but came at once upon hearing of the scene unfolding on the grasslands. "Shoot!" she cried, placing her daughter on the ground and forgetting about her. Kojin was only 4 years of age and had no conception of the danger up ahead. Giggling, she ran to her brother. The leopard's fur was so pretty, just like her eldest brother Ogadai's hunting dogs, and she reached out to pat one of the animals on the head. A gasp rose from the crowd, but it was too late. The leopards roared. The crowd cried out. Temujin had his bow and arrow ready, but the speed at which it all happened caught even him off guard, and before he knew it, the leopard was in the air. Kojin's chubby body was blocking the spot on the leopard's head at which Temujin would have aimed. A shot to the body would only injure it, aggravating it further and putting Kojin in even greater danger. Temujin's 4 great generals threw down their bows and drew their blades. But Guo Jing was quicker, rolling forward and grabbing Kojin, just as a paw ripped at his shoulder. The generals ran toward the leopards, but they heard only a rapid whoosh of air as the beasts fell backward, growled, rolled onto their backs, and lay still. Temujin's wife ran to her children, fished the crying Kojin from Guo Jing's arms, and pulled Tolui to her bosom. "Who killed my leopards?" No one answered. Kejane, upon hearing the leopards growling, had launched 4 iron devil nuts tipped with poison. Everyone had been too focused on the scene unfolding before them to notice. "Brother Sengum," Temujin said, smiling, "I will buy you 4 of the best leopards to make up for it, as well as 8 pairs of black condors." Sengum was furious, but gave no reply. Ong Khan, meanwhile, was roaring at Tusaka. Humiliated, the boy threw himself to the ground, where he unleashed a tantrum born of mortification. Ong Khan ordered him to stop, but the boy took no notice. Temujin was still grateful for all that Ong Khan had done for him in the past, and he felt it would be a great shame to sever ties between the families over such a trivial matter. He smiled, bent down, and picked up Tusaka. Tusaka was still clamorous and tried to struggle free, but was held fast. "Dear Ong Khan, sir, the children were only playing," Temujin said, still smiling. "Let's not get upset. He is a good boy. I am thinking of betrothing my daughter Kojin to him. What do you say?" Ong Khan looked at Kojin. Her eyes filled with tears, clear like a winter's lake, her skin soft as a lamb's. "Why not indeed? Let our families be tied in ever closer bonds. Why not unite my eldest granddaughter with your son Jochi?" "Thank you, father," Temujin said, and turned to Sengum. "Brother, we are a proper family now." Sengum felt that by birth he was of a higher station than Temujin, but he had always been jealous and resentful. He was not pleased that their relationship would be further cemented with these marriages, but he could hardly go against his own father, so he forced a smile. Wanyan Hongnie looked around and noticed the 6 freaks of the south standing in the crowd, and a shock rippled through him. "What are they doing here?" he said to himself. "They're chasing me. I wonder if that evil Taoist is with them." But this time he had a whole army of soldiers to protect him. All he had to do was give the order. The freaks, however, seemed not to have even seen him. He slipped behind a group of bodyguards. He was so consumed in thinking of how to deal with the freaks that he barely noticed the alliance being forged between the 2 Khans. Temujin was quick to assess the situation and realized the leopards had been poisoned by the group of strange southerners who had appeared in their midst. They had saved his daughter's life. He waited for Ong Khan and the others to leave before instructing Borokul to reward them with furs and gold. He ruffled Guo Jing's hair and told him how brave he had been. Most adults would be too scared to risk their lives like that, let alone a child. How could he have been so brave? Temujin asked. Guo Jing just smiled dumbly. They were going to eat Tolui and Kojin, was all he could come up with. Temujin laughed. Tolui then told his father about their fight with Tusaka. Temujin was secretly furious to hear that Sengum's son was bringing up stories of his past humiliation, but he did not let on. Ignore him in the future, was his only reply. He was silent for a moment, then turned to Gildan Quan. How much would you want to stay and teach my son your skills? Gildan Quan thought to himself for a moment. They had thought of retreating somewhere remote to teach Guo Jing, but staying here would be even better. We would never have dared ask the Khan to let us stay and serve you. Pay us what you think we are worth. We are in no position to make demands. This response pleased the Khan, and he instructed Borokul to make the arrangements. Then he left to organize the farewell for the Jin princes.
Cyclone Mei must have buried Chen here,
Rider Han said when they had a moment to themselves.
so she came this way.
Our first priority is to find Iron Corpse, dead or alive, Kejene said. Indeed, if we don't get rid of her, there will be only further trouble. There will only be further trouble, Zhu Kong said. I fear she did not die from the poison. We must avenge Fifth Brother, Jade Han added, her eyes moist. For the next few days, Rider Han, Gildan Quan, and Jade Han rode around the steppe looking for Iron Corpse, but they could find no trace of her.
Brother K used poison on his devil nuts,
Rider Han said.
She must have perished in some mountain cave.
The others hoped he was right, but Kejene knew just how ruthless Twice-Foul Dark Wind were. He was anxious, very anxious, but now was not the time to share his feelings. He knew that they would not pass until the day he could touch her corpse for himself. Once settled on the steppe, they asked Guo Jing to take them to see his mother, Lily Li, so that they could ask after Justice Duan's whereabouts. It was the first time Lily Li had heard her home dialect in years, and she burst into tears. She had scarcely met another Han Chinese, let alone someone from Linan. She and Jade Han found in each other's hearts shared sorrows, loves lost and dreams of home, and their tears flowed just like their stories. That night, Lily Li made them a feast of mutton, soy braised, sliced, and made into meatballs, a reminder of the fresh and delicate flavors they had left behind in the south. The freaks ate greedily, and together they reminisced.
The Khan asked us to stay here and teach his son kung fu, so we will be here a few months at least,
Gildan Quan told her. As evening turned to night, the freaks took their leave and returned to their ger to discuss their plans. I don't think we should go back south, said Nan the Merciful. Brother, Jade Han replied, we've spent so many years traveling up here in the bitter cold. Now we've finally found the boy, why not take him back south and teach him our kung fu there? I too am homesick, but sister, what will Guo Jing do in the south? The same as his father. Plant rice, grow vegetables, chop wood, and hunt. We will take care of him, but he won't be idle. Farming is a full-time job. Will he have time to train? That's right. He will have to plow the fields, sow the seeds, transplant the seedlings, weed, water, reap, thresh, separate the hay, look after the oxen. He'll have an hour at most to spare from morning till night. That's not enough. He's no natural, let's not forget. Boys from the south are only free of the fields if their family has money, in which case they spend their days singing, flirting, and gambling. Or else they study, write poetry, and play chess. No one respects us masters of the Wulin. If the Mongolians ever invaded, we'd be the only ones able to defend our homeland. It's better he trains here. Life in the south is too comfortable. The freaks agreed. Guo Jing would be better off training here among the fighters of the steppe. And they had a contest to win. The next day, Jade Han went to tell Lily Lee of their decision. She too missed home, but if the freaks had decided not to go home, neither would she. So, together, they stayed in the north, where the freaks would continue teaching their fighting skills to Guo Jing and Tolui. Temujin knew the Han Chinese were unsurpassed when it came to close combat, but he insisted the boys also learn Mongolian horsemanship and archery. The freaks were not qualified to teach them this, so this part of their education was left to Jebe and Borokul. Evenings were reserved for Guo Jing alone, when the freaks concentrated on boxing, swordsmanship, concealed weapon techniques, and elements of lightness Qinggong Kung Fu. Guo Jing worked hard and without complaint, motivated as ever to avenge his father. Zhu Kong, Gildan Quan, and Jade Han's skills were still too advanced, and Ke Zhen's throwing and staff techniques were even more out of his reach, so the burden of teaching fell mostly on Rider Han and Woodcutter Nan. Guo Jing studied each move with a methodical thoroughness, building a solid foundation. But they were only good for improving strength, not preparing him to meet someone also trained in the martial arts.
You fight like a camel, boy,
Rider Han often found himself saying.
They may be strong, but can they defeat a leopard?
Guo Jing responded with a foolish smile. The freaks were tireless in their efforts, but could not help but feel discouraged when they saw how difficult it was for the boy to master these basic moves. But they could not give up, even if they knew he had little chance of matching Chu Chuji's student. Gildan Quan decided to calculate their odds, using the skills in arithmetic he had honed in the marketplace.
I'd say Chu Chuji has at most an 80% chance of finding Ironheart Yang's widow. That means we've got a 20% advantage already. Furthermore, it's 50-50 that Yang's widow gave birth to a girl, so that gives us another 40%. If it was a boy, he might be weaker than even our Guo Jing, so that's another 10%. Say he's tall and strong, he could be just as stupid as our boy. So, all in all, that adds up to an 80% chance of us winning.
Nice math? Question mark? The other freaks paused and then nodded their agreement, even if they knew in their hearts that to imagine that Yang's son would be worse at kung fu than Guo Jing was but a vain attempt at self-reassurance. But the boy was honest and obedient, and they liked him very much. Two. 10 years passed quickly out in the steppes of outer. 10 years passed quickly out in the steppes of outer Mongolia, where the vibrant summer grass was covered year after year by winter's thick blanket of snow. Guo Jing had grown into a burly young man of 16. With only 2 years left before the contest, the freaks were stepping up their efforts. They had halted his riding and archery practice in order to concentrate solely on boxing and swordsmanship. Over the years, Temujin's tribe had grown as he defeated his rivals. He was a strict commander, collecting the best men around him, and his force only grew in skill and discipline. His bravery was matched by a deep understanding of strategy, and ever more territory, livestock, and people of the north gradually came under his control. He could now stand as equal to Ong Khan. The north winds abated, the snow stopped falling, but the desert was still icy cold. It was tomb sweeping day, and the 6 freaks of the south woke early. They prepared the cows and sheep as sacrifices, and took Guo Jing with them to visit Zhang Asheng's grave. The Khan's camp at this point had moved some distance away, so that even on horseback it took half a day to get there. They climbed the hill where they had done battle all those years before, and swept away the snow covering their brother's last resting place. They lit candles, burned incense, and said their prayers.
Brother, Jade Han began, whispering quietly, these last 10 years we have given all our efforts over to teaching the boy. He is not naturally gifted. In fact, he struggles. But we hope you are watching over us and will help him in the contest in 2 years' time. The boy must not ruin the good reputation of the 7 freaks of the South.
The raw winds of the north had sculpted faces with sharper angles, bodies with harder edges. White hairs speckled the sides of their faces like stars in the night sky. Jade Han had lost none of her charms, but by now she was a beautiful woman rather than the blushing maid of yesteryear. Zhu Kong surveyed the skulls piled beside the grave. Despite years of beating winds and snow, they were still perfectly intact. A feeling he could not give words to rose within him. He and Gildan Quan had searched for Iron Corpse all over this harsh landscape, in every valley and cave, yet they could find no trace of her, no skeleton, no sign she had ever existed. How could a blind woman live for so long in seclusion without leaving the slightest clue to her whereabouts? She had blown past like a noxious wind. The only evidence of all that had happened was this grave and the piles of skulls. The freaks ate and then started back home to get some rest before practice was due to begin again. Woodcutter Nan was teaching Guo Jing split mountain palm technique, as it involved many of his most accomplished moves. After some 80 contortions with his hand, Nan suddenly struck at Guo Jing's back and flipped the young man in a move known as the hawk fights the rabbit. Guo Jing ducked and spun his leg in an autumn wind blows the fallen leaves. Nan jabbed and thrust his palms in an iron ox plows the field. Guo Jing was edging back when Nan shouted, "Pay attention!" He made to hit Guo Jing in the chest with his left hand. Guo Jing blocked, Nan slapped his palms together, and Guo tumbled to the ground. Guo Jing met the packed earth with sand. Guo Jing met the packed earth and sand with both hands and rebounded back to his feet. His cheeks were hot with shame. Woodcutter Nan was just about to explain the move when laughter burst through a nearby thicket. Out came a young girl.
Guo Jing, did your Shifu get you again? I'm practicing. Leave me alone. I like it when you get beaten up.
It was Kojin. Not much younger than her brother Tolui and Guo Jing, she had grown up with the boys, and this, together with her parents' coddling, had turned her into a know-it-all. They often fought, but Kojin was at least able to admit when she had gone too far.
I'm busy with my lessons. Go away,
Guo Jing replied.
Being trounced, more like.
Just then, a group of Mongolian soldiers came riding up to them. One of the squad commanders jumped down from his horse and bowed. "Kojin, the Khan has sent for you." Mongolians did not bother with fancy titles, so his use of the Khan's daughter's given name caused no offense.
What is it?
"Ong Khan has sent messengers."
I'm not going, she said, her brow wrinkled.
"The Khan will be angry if you don't." Kojin's betrothal to Ong Khan's grandson Tusaka had been decided all those years ago, but her heart had not obeyed, and her affections were firmly focused elsewhere. They were too young for it to be called love, but the thought of leaving Guo Jing and marrying the domineering Tusaka was too much to bear. Her lips puckered, and she said nothing. But she could not defy her father, so she reluctantly followed the soldiers back to the camp. So this next bit has a voice I'm going to need to remember for later, and I almost assuredly will not, so my apologies in advance. That night, Guo Jing was woken by the sound of clapping outside his ger. He sat up. Guo Jing, come out. Guo Jing did not recognize the voice. It was speaking Chinese. He lifted a corner of the flap of material that covered the entrance. He could just about make out in the moonlight the shape of a person standing by the tree. Guo Jing stepped out into the night and approached the figure. It was dressed in long, fluttering robes, hair swept up in a bun. "Who are you? What do you want?" "Are you Guo Jing?" "Yes."
Where's your dagger? The one that can slice through metal as if it were mud. Show me!
Oh, actually, that might be Chu-Chuji. Oh, no, he's not. Never mind. No spoilers. It's not Chu-Chuji. The figure twitched. Oh, sorry.
Where's your dagger? The one that can slice through metal as if it were mud. Show me!
The figure twitched, then suddenly leaped toward him, a palm aimed at his chest. Guo Jing dodged out of the way. "What was that for?"
I was just trying to assess the extent of your abilities, he replied, throwing another punch, quick and hard.
Huh? Oh, I skipped a page. That's why I'm confused. Yes, there we go. Anger exploded in Guo Jing as he leaned back to avoid the blow. He grabbed at the man's wrist and with his other hand seized his elbow in a move known across the Wulin as Brave Soldier Breaks Wrist. Well, that's appropriate. Part of the split muscles lock bones technique, as taught to him by Zhu Kong. Once you have hold of the wrist and elbow, a push and twist will pop the bones out of place. Zhu Kong had been perfecting the ancient technique over the last 10 years in preparation for Cyclone Mei's return. This was the first time Guo Jing had fought someone other than his Shifus, and his intelligent choice of a split muscles lock bones move had taken his opponent by surprise. The hours of practice had proved worthwhile. Guo Jing was about to burst the man's wrist out of joint when he saw another palm coming at his face. Guo Jing let go and jumped back. He turned as the force of the move sent a rush of air that burned his cheeks. It had only just missed. Guo Jing turned back. The man was young and handsome, not much older than himself, it seemed, with long eyelashes and fine features. Not bad. 10 years at the hands of the 6 freaks of the South haven't been a waste after all, the man said. Guo Jing was cautious. Who are you? What do you want? Let's practice some more. His palms were raised and ready. Guo Jing did not move. He waited for another rush of air, then tilted, grabbed the man's arm, and pinched his cheek with his free hand. Guo Jing tugged at the mystery assailant's jaw. Zhu Kong called this move, laugh the jaw out of joint. But this time the young man defended with his right and struck with his left. Guo Jing used further maneuvers from the split muscles lock bones technique, one after another. But the young Taoist was of nimble physique, and his hands were quick. He turned and twisted so Guo Jing could not tell what was coming next. Guo Jing was growing increasingly alarmed. The man's foot flew up and struck his hip. Thankfully, he had not put his entire strength behind the kick. Guo Jing's hands flew around his body, defending his vulnerable spots as best he could, but the young man kept increasing the pressure. Just as he was beginning to think he would not be able to hold off the attack for much longer, a voice called from behind him.
Go for his stomach!
Rider Han. Guo Jing turned around and saw all 6 of his Shifus. He had not realized they were all behind him. His spirit renewed, he did as his third Shifu instructed. Rider Han was right. The young Taoist's lower body was not as strong. Before long, Guo Jing had forced his opponent back. Victory felt close, so he pressed on. The young man stumbled, and Guo Jing performed a Mandarin duck kick, one foot following the other like a pair of mating birds. But the young man had laid the perfect trap.
Watch out!
Rider Han and Jade called out together. But Guo Jing did not know what he should be looking out for. Before he knew it, the young man had grabbed hold of his right foot and hit him with his palm. Guo Jing could only somersault out of the hold and land on his back with a thump. Despite the pain, he flipped to his feet in a flying carp. He was about to attack again when he saw the freaks had surrounded his opponent. Opponent. I am not enunciating very well today. I apologize. The young Taoist cupped his hands and spoke in a slow and clear voice.
Disciple Harmony Yin of the Quanzhen sect, he said, kneeling down. I am here on instructions from my reverend master, Elder Eternal Spring Chu Chuji. He sends his warmest greetings to the heroes of the South.
The freaks were surprised, and also a little fearful that the young man was here as part of some devious plan. Harmony Yin rose to his feet, took a letter from inside his shirt, and passed it to Zhu Kong. Just then, Kejene heard the sounds of Mongolian soldiers on patrol. "Let's move inside and talk." The young man followed the freaks into their ger. Gildan Quan lit a sheep-fat candle. The freaks lived here together, except for Jade Han, who lived with the other unmarried Mongolian women of the tribe. Harmony Yin looked around at the simple surroundings and realized life was not easy out here on the steppe.
Sirs, you have been working hard all these years, he said, bowing again. My master has sent me to express his eternal gratitude.
Huh, Kejene snorted. If that's really why you're here, why did you attack Guo Jing? Were you trying to intimidate us before the contest? Zhu Kong opened the letter and began reading out loud.
Chu Chuji, disciple of the Quanzhen sect, sends his sincerest greetings to the heroes of the South, Master K, Master Zhu, Master Han, Master Nan, Master Quan, Mistress Han, and the late Master Zhang. Once 7, always 7. It has been 16 years now since we left the South, and the moons have come and gone so quickly. The 7 heroes are honorable fighters and people of their word. Your righteousness and integrity are awe-inspiring. Your benevolence and chivalry is matched only by the ancients of old.
Kejene's frown softened. Zhu Kong continued. Oh, I've been reading it with the wrong voice the entire time. I'm not rereading that bit. Sorry. Zhu Kong continued.
I was deeply saddened to hear of Master Zhang's passing in Mongolia. He was a loyal and dedicated patriot, and he will never be forgotten. I have been blessed with your good fortune, having found Ironheart Yang's wife and child 9 years ago without bloodshed.
Hearing that the child had been found gave them a momentary shock. They were still yet to tell Guo Jing and his mother about the whole affair. Zhu Kong looked over at Guo Jing, but he appeared unaffected, so he read on.
In another 2 years, when the flowers are blooming and the grasses of the South are swaying in the wind, we will meet and drink at the garden of the 8 drunken immortals. Life passes like the drying morning dew, and these 16 years have been like a dream. Do the brave heroes of the Wulin laugh at my foolishness?
Zhu Kong stopped.
And?
Rider Han asked.
There is no more. It's definitely his calligraphy.
The child was also a boy? Kejene said, turning to Harmony Yin. Is his name Yang Vitality Kang?
Yes.
So you study with him? He is your younger martial brother?
He is my senior. I am older than him by 1 year, but he started his training with the Quanzhen sect 2 years before me.
Guo Jing's kung fu was a trifle compared to this young man's, which meant that Yang Kang's skills must be even more impressive. Their mood sank even lower. And Chu Chuji seemed to know about all that had happened to them in quite some detail, including the death of their brother Zhang Asheng. Were you testing him earlier? Kejene pressed. Harmony Yin sensed the cold edge in his voice, and it made him feel anxious.
I wouldn't dare.
Go back to your Shifu and tell him not to worry. We will be there at the Garden of the 8 Drunken Immortals. We sent no letter in reply. Harmony Yin hesitated, unsure what to say. Chu Chuji had indeed told him to find a way to assess Guo Jing's character and the extent of his kung fu. But Harmony Yin was young, and the only way he could think of to complete the instruction was to fight Guo Jing under the veil of darkness. A crude method, he realized now. Kejene's reaction frightened him.
I'll be going then.
was all he could manage in response. Kei accompanied him out, and Harmony Yin bowed. "How about a somersault, too?" Kay replied, and caught hold of the young man's collar. Harmony Yin tried to push Kay's hand away, but Kay's grip was firm, and he ended up tumbling back in a somersault after all. This made Kay even more furious. He lifted the boy up, howled, and threw him to the ground, where he landed on his back, sending a jolt of pain up his spine. He managed to scramble to his feet and limped away without another word.
What terrible manners! At least you taught him a lesson, brother, Rider Han said.
Kay did not reply. After a long pause, he gave a deep sigh. The other freaks understood their brother's mood. "We have to fight, even if we lose," Nan said, breaking the silence. "Fourth brother is right," Jade Han said. "We wandered the South together for so long before coming north, ever since we swore our oath of martial loyalty all those years ago. We have been through many dangers, but the seven freaks of the South have never been cowed." Kei nodded and turned to Guo Jing. "Go back to sleep. Tomorrow the real work begins." "3. The freaks grew stricter in their training. But just as in the study of music or chess, demanding fast results can choke initial promise, and Guo Jing was not naturally gifted to begin with. The pressure frightened him, and he was easily flustered. In the 3 months that followed Harmony Yin's visit, he appeared to regress. It had taken many years of bitter toil for the freaks to gain their individual skills, so for Guo Jing to acquire all of them in the course of just a few short summers and winters would have required a special talent indeed. How could they expect a boy of average capabilities to achieve such a feat? The freaks knew that it was only realistic to expect the boy to learn Rider Han or Woodcutter Nan's skills alone, and perhaps after 30 years of persistent effort, he might come to acquire half of their skills put together. Laughing Buddha Zhang Asheng would have made the most suitable Shifu, if only he had not departed so young. But the freaks were single-minded in their desire to defeat the Taoist Chu Chuji, and even though they knew it would be better to concentrate on a few techniques rather than try to teach him everything, they could not help themselves. They could not help themselves. There we go. Fumbling. For the last 16 years, Zhu Kong had been going over in his head their encounter with Chu Chuji in the Garden of the Eight Drunken Immortals, reliving the Taoist's every move and thrust. His memory was uncommonly clear. But, try as he might, he could not find any weakness to exploit. Only twice foul dark wind would be capable of defeating that stinky old cow muzzle, he concluded at last. Note to self. Next time you need to throw an insult, call them a stinky old cow muzzle. That morning, as the sun was rising, Jade Han was already busy teaching the young man 2 moves from the Yue Maiden Sword repertoire. The first, Branch Beats the White Chimpanzee, involved leaping and making 2 turns in the air before pulling the sword back to attack. Guo Jing had worked hard on his core stability, but his jumps lacked agility and speed. At first he could only manage a half turn, and after at least 8 tries he was still half a turn short. Jade Han was becoming more and more frustrated, but she forced herself to stay calm, focusing on teaching him how to concentrate his energy in the tips of his toes, and turn with his waist and legs. He flew up high, but forgot to spin. This continued for several more attempts. After all these years spent in the deserts of the north, after burying fifth brother in these strange lands, after all their efforts, the boy was hopeless. It was all hopeless. The tears poured down Jade Han's cheeks. She cast her sword into the dirt, covered her face, and ran away. Guo Jing ran after her, but she was too quick for him. He stopped, watched her go, his heart pounding. The kindness of his Shifus had been steady like the mountains. All he wanted was to practice their art well, to show them his gratitude. But he could not do it, no matter how hard he tried. Guo Jing, come here! It was Kojin. He turned and saw her approach on the back of a horse, her face a mixture of anxiety and excitement. What is it? He replied. Come quick and see for yourself, said Kojin. Condors fighting. Lots of them. I'm in the middle of training. I just saw your Shifu leave. Guo Jing looked up at her. Those condors are really going for each other. Come and take a look. Guo Jing's heart beat faster. He did want to see it, but he still felt his seventh Shifu's disappointment. I can't, he said. I came all this way to tell you instead of going to see it myself, Kojin responded hotly. Don't expect me to go with you later. Go now. You can tell me all about it once I'm home. It's all the same to me. Kojin jumped down from her horse. If you're not going, I'm not going either, she said, pouting. I wonder who's going to win, the black condors or the white? The pair of white condors that live on the cliff? Yes. The place is surrounded by black ones, but the white ones are much stronger. They've pecked 3 black ones to death already. Guo Jing could stand it no longer. He grabbed Kojin's hand, jumped onto her horse, and together they rode to the bottom of the cliff. Almost 20 huge black birds had surrounded one pair of white condors. They screeched and pecked. Feathers flew. The white condors had made their nest at the top of the cliff. This pair were unusually large specimens of what was an extremely rare breed. The Mongolian elders called them divine, and some foolish local women even came to pray to them. One of the white condors stalked forward and pecked one of the black condors, and it fell, dead, just before Kojin's horse. The remaining black condors scattered, but regrouped quickly and surrounded the pair again. Another fight ensued, drawing an even bigger crowd of locals, until there were at least several hundred gathered at the foot of the cliff, discussing every move and attack. Temujin himself arrived, bringing with him Ogadai and Tolui. Everyone was enthralled by the spectacle. Being regulars at the cliff, Guo Jing, Tolui, and Kojin saw the white condors nearly every day, flying to and from their nest. Sometimes they would throw them chunks of mutton. The children considered the birds their friends. Go get him! On the left! Turn! That's it! Kill him! 2 more black birds fell. The white condor's feathers looked as if they had been dipped in red ink. At that moment, one of the largest black birds squawked, and 10 or so more beat their wings and took off, disappearing into the clouds above. 4 black condors remained. The fight looked to be coming to an end, and the crowd whooped and called out in excitement. Soon 3 more birds took flight, followed by one of the white condors, leaving just 1 black and 1 white in a standoff. The last black condor started flapping its wings, about to take flight, when the white condor attacked. Then a scream from above. 10 condors swooped out from the clouds together. Excellent tactics, Temujin laughed. The white condor dropped to the foot of the cliff, and the black condors followed, scratching and clawing at its corpse. The children were shocked, and Kojin burst into tears. Papa, kill him! Kill them! But Temujin turned to his sons. We must learn from those clever birds, my sons. A most useful military lesson. The young men nodded. The black condors flew up and into a cave near the top of the cliff, where 2 small white heads had been poking out only moments earlier. Papa, why won't you do something? Kojin then turned. Guo Jing, look! The white condors have babies! How come we didn't know? Oh, Papa, kill them, please! With a smile, Temujin raised his bow, and with a twang, his arrow took down one of the birds. The crowd clapped. Temujin then gave the bow to Ogadai. Here, your turn. Ogadai shot and killed one too. By the time a third fell to Tolwi's arrow, the black condors were scattering in all directions. Temujin's other men also began firing until they had flown up high and out of reach. A reward for whoever can bring one down, Temujin cried. Jebe wanted his student to show off his skills, so he gave his bow to Guo Jing and whispered, "Kneel down and aim for the neck." Guo Jing obeyed. He held the weighty bow in his left hand and drew back the arrow. Two black condors were flying wing to wing. He took aim and shot. The bow bent like the moon. The arrow flashed like a meteor. It pierced through the first condor's neck and lodged itself into the abdomen of the second. Together, the birds fell to the ground. A roar came from the crowd, and, frightened, the remaining birds dispersed. "Present them to my father," Kojin whispered in his ear. He fetched the birds and ran over to the Khan's horse, where he kneeled in the dirt, lifting them up before him. The boy's trick delighted Temujin. The birds had a wingspan of more than 3 meters, and their features were hard like shards of metal. They were capable of seizing and making off with large sheep and even ponies. Tigers were known to keep their distance. To kill 2 with 1 arrow was a mighty feat indeed. So these aren't just large birds. These are like pterodactyls. These are big, big, big animals. Temujin ordered one of his men to take the birds. "Good boy, you are most accomplished with the bow." "My Shifu Jebe taught me." "A master known as God of the Bow and a student to match." Temujin smiled. "Father," Tolui said, "you promised a reward to whoever could shoot down a condor. My Anda shot 2. What will you give him?" "He may have whatever his heart desires. What would you like, Guo Jing?" "Anything?" Tolui asked in excitement. "Anything he wants?" "Am I known for lying to children?" Guo Jing had lived all these years under the Khan's protection. He was liked by the whole tribe, especially for his pureness of heart. They had never treated him differently just because he was Chinese. They turned to the boy and waited for his reply. "The Khan has always been good to me, and my mother has everything she needs," Guo Jing began. "No other reward is necessary." "You are filial indeed, thinking of your mother first. But what is it you want? There is no need to be frightened. Speak from your heart." Guo Jing paused and looked up at Temujin from where he was still kneeling. "I want for nothing, but I do ask the Khan for one thing on behalf of another." "Yes?" "The Khan's grandson Tusaka is mean and cruel. Kojin will live a bitter life if she marries him. I beg the Khan not to betroth her to him." Temujin was surprised, but then burst into laughter. "Ha ha ha! Those are indeed the words of a child. How could I possibly go back on such an agreement? It was decided many years ago. I cannot renege on a promise. Come, come, I shall give you a reward." Temujin took a small knife from his belt and gave it to Guo Jing. His men clapped and gasped, jealous at such a gift. They knew this weapon had slain countless enemies, and was very precious to the Khan. He did not part with it lightly. Guo Jing thanked Temujin. He had seen it tucked into the Khan's belt many a time, but now he could examine it up close. The scabbard was inlaid with gold, and the handle was crowned with a tiger's head cast in the same precious metal, fierce and lifelike. "This, my boy, is my golden dagger. Take it and use it to kill our enemies." "I will do my best for the Khan," Guo Jing replied. Kojin suddenly began sobbing. She jumped onto her horse and galloped away. Temujin's heart was hard like iron, but even he had noticed his daughter's displeasure at the agreement. He sighed, turned his horse, and left for camp. Once the crowd had dispersed, Guo Jing removed the dagger from its sheath and held the cold metal in his hand. The blade was tainted with the faintest shadow of blood. Who knew how many had died from a thrust of this weapon? It was short, but thick and heavy. He put it back in its scabbard. He put it back in his. We're going to try that again. My bad, I'm having a rough go of it. He put it back in its scabbard and attached it to his belt. Then he drew his sword and began performing some moves from Yue Maiden's sword. Despite the hours he had spent practicing, he just could not get Branch Beats the White Chimpanzee right. He either didn't get enough height, or else he couldn't complete the spins. He was becoming increasingly frustrated and was losing control of his movements. Sweat poured down his forehead. Guo Jing turned. He could hear the beating of horses' hooves. He stopped his practice. It was Kojin. She rode close and dismounted. She then lay down in the grass, her hand propping up her head, and watched Guo Jing. "Take a break," she called, noticing he seemed out of sorts. "Leave me be. I don't have time for this." Kojin did not reply, but continued watching him, a smile lightly drawn on her face. After a while she removed a small handkerchief from her breast, tied 2 knots in it, and threw it at Guo Jing. "Dry the sweat." Guo Jing mumbled in response, but continued his practice. A while later she spoke again. "Why did you beg my father not to force me to marry Tusaka?" "Tusaka is a bad man. He once set a pair of leopards on your brother Tolwi. If you marry him, he will beat you." "But you will defend me." "How will I do that?" Guo Jing said with surprise. "Who will marry me if I don't marry him?" "Oh, who will marry me if I don't marry him?" Kojin's tone was softer now. "How should I know?" Guo Jing replied with a shake of his head. "Huh!" Kojin's gentle blush turned an angry crimson. "What do you know?" But her anger did not last long, and soon the silence between them was interrupted by the cries of the condor's young, high up on the cliff. Then came screeches above. The other white condor had returned. It had been circling all this time, reluctant to return after having witnessed from afar the death of its companion. Guo Jing stopped and looked up. The bird was howling in pain. "That poor bird," Kojin said. "Yes, it must be so sad." The condor let out one last, long scream and flew up into the clouds. "Why is it flying so high?" Kojin asked. Just then it came shooting through the clouds and flew straight into the cliff face. Kojin and Guo Jing both yelped and jumped up in shock. They stood beside each other, taking in the scene in silence.
"Impressive! Very impressive!"
A loud voice came from behind. They turned and saw an old Chinese man with a white beard and red cheeks. He looked kind and carried a horsetail whip. His dress was strange, and he wore his hair in 3 buns. He stood proudly, his clothes neat and clean, without the slightest trace of dust. Which out in this desert landscape was unusual indeed. His robes reminded Guo Jing of those worn by Harmony Yin, who he had later discovered was a Taoist from China's central plains. Oh, that's right, lose the page. So something I've mentioned earlier is this book's pages are printed in uneven. Oh, geez, I don't know where we are. They're not the same width, so like sometimes I fumble finger them. Sadly. Come on, where are you? Ah, I think that's it. Yes, impressive, very impressive. Perfect, beautiful. Sorry about that. They turned and something, something, something. We'll just take the paragraph from the top. Impressive, very impressive, a loud voice came from behind. They turned and saw an old Chinese man with a white beard and red cheeks. He looked kind and carried a horsetail whip. His dress was strange, and he wore his hair in 3 buns. He stood proudly, his clothes neat and clean, without the slightest trace of dust, which out in this desert landscape was unusual indeed. His robes reminded Guo Jing of those worn by Harmony Yin, who he had later discovered was a Taoist from China's central plains. This man also spoke Chinese, but as Kojin could not understand, she soon lost interest and turned back to the cliff. Those baby condors have lost their mother and father. What are they going to do now? Kojin continued. The cliff face was smooth and reached up to touch the clouds. The young condors had not learned to fly yet. They were stuck. They were going to starve up there. Guo Jing looked up. Their only hope is that someone grows wings and flies up there to save them. He glanced at the old man, took up his sword again, and went back to his training. He still was not making any progress, and was now starting to despair. Just then the voice came again, loud and clear. Keep doing it like that, and it won't matter if you train for 100 years. You'll never get it. Guo Jing turned back to the Taoist. What did you say? He smiled, but did not answer. The man then took 2 steps forward. Just then Guo Jing felt his arm go numb, and with a flash of green his sword was suddenly in the man's hand. Zhu Kong had taught him seize the blade bare-handed, and though he was yet to perfect the technique, he understood the principle. But the Taoist had done something else, and Guo Jing was not sure how. Fear gripped him. He retreated to Kojin's side and drew the dagger Temujin had given him. Watch carefully, the Taoist called. He jumped up, with a swishing sound, made 6 or 7 turns with the sword, and softly landed back down. Guo Jing was amazed. The Taoist threw away the sword and smiled. That white condor is an impressive bird. We must indeed save its young. He began running toward the cliff, and then, quick like a monkey and light like a bird, he scrambled up the rock face. Guo Jing and Kojin watched from below, even more astounded than before. Just one slip would kill him. He continued, higher and higher, smaller and smaller, up into the clouds. Kojin covered her eyes. What's happening? He's almost at the top. He's there. He made it. She lowered her hands and continued to peer up. It really looked as if the Taoist might fall. His sleeves flapped. She screamed, but he was on solid ground. From below, he looked just like one of the condors. He slipped his hand into the cave where the condors had made their nest, grabbed hold of the 2 chicks, and tucked them into the front of his robes. Then, with his hand against the cliff, he slid back down, slowed every now and again by a bump in the rock or a crevice that caught his foot. He was at the bottom in moments. They ran to him. The Taoist passed the birds to Kojin and spoke in Mongolian. Will you look after them? Yes, yes, she said, reaching out to take them. Watch out for their beaks. They may be small, but their peck is painful. Kojin fastened her belt around their tiny feet and took them in her arms, a smile conquering her face. I'm going to catch some insects to feed them. Wait, the man said. If you take them, you must promise me one thing. What's that? You mustn't tell anyone I climbed the cliff. That's fine, I won't tell, Kojin said. And another thing. The condors will grow to be very aggressive, he continued. Feed them insects first, then meat. And be careful. We will have one each, she said to Guo Jing, but I will look after them both to begin with. Guo Jing nodded mutely as Kojin mounted her horse and galloped away. In fact, Guo Jing had not really been paying attention to the birds, as he was still confounded by the Taoist's demonstration of branch beats the white chimpanzee. The Taoist picked up Guo Jing's sword, gave it to him, and started to leave. "Wait, please don't go," Guo Jing said.
"And why ever not?"
Guo Jing scratched his head, unsure how to reply. Then, without warning, he dropped to his knees and began touching the ground with his forehead.
"Why are you kowtowing?" the Taoist said.
The Taoist had a kindly air, like an old uncle with whom one could talk freely. A rush of familiarity overcame Guo Jing, and two fat tears rolled down his cheeks. "I'm not smart. I'm always making mistakes in my training. It frustrates my mentors. I have 6.
"What are you going to do about it?" the Taoist smiled.
I practice day and night, and I still can't do it. I just can't."
"Do you want me to show you a trick?"
"Yes," said Guo Jing, kowtowing again.
"You are a sincere young man. In 3 days it will be the 15th day of the month when the moon is at its fullest. I will be waiting for you at the top of the cliff," he said, pointing. "But you mustn't tell a soul." And then he left.
"Wait, I can't get up there," Guo Jing cried. But the Taoist was already far, far away, his feet barely skimming the ground. "He made it impossible on purpose," Guo Jing said to himself. "He never wanted to help me." He paused, and then continued, muttering, "I already have a teacher, 6 of them, all making such an effort. It's my own fault. What could this man say that will fix that? He seems skilled, that's for sure, but what good does that do me? I'll never be able to do what he does." He looked up again at the top of the cliff and decided to forget about the encounter. He took up his sword and began once again practicing Branch Beats the White Chimpanzee, jumping, turning, until the sun disappeared behind the mountains and his belly began to rumble. It was time to return home. Three days sped past. Guo Jing spent the afternoon taking instruction from Rider Han in the use of his golden dragon whip. This weapon was like no other. If it were not mastered, it could prove more dangerous to the bearer than to his enemy. Guo Jing cracked the whip with all his might and ended up slashing himself on the head, bringing an egg-like bump. Rider Han, not known to be a gentle teacher, slapped him across the cheek. Guo Jing made no reply, but kept practicing. Rider Han regretted having been so rough with the boy. He was trying, that much was clear. He decided not to hit him again, despite the constant string of mistakes. He taught the boy 5 moves in total, loaded him up with words of encouragement, and then mounted his horse and rode off. The Golden Dragon Whip was no easy weapon, and after 10 or so attempts, Guo Jing was covered in bruises from his head to his arms to his thighs. He was exhausted and in pain, so he decided to lie down on the grass and take a short nap. But time passed faster than his body sensed it, and when he awoke again, the moon had appeared from behind the mountains. His body was throbbing, and his cheek was still red from his third Shifu's slap. He looked up at the cliff. Somehow sleep had given him new courage. "If Uncle can climb up there, why can't I?" He ran to the bottom of the rock face, grabbed hold of some low, snaking vines and roots, and began hoisting himself up. But after 20 meters or so, the vegetation stopped. He looked up to see a smooth wall above him. How was he going to get up there? He clenched his teeth and tried to find his next foothold, but he kept slipping. If he fell, he would be nothing more than a pile of bones. There was no way he could go any farther, so he sighed and started making his way back down again. But it soon became apparent that the descent would be just as difficult. He could no longer see the places he had put his feet and hands, and it was too high to jump. His fourth Shifu's words echoed in his ears. "Nothing eludes a man of sound heart and good will." I think that's, yeah. Since it would be death to stay put, he had no choice but to continue upward. He removed his dagger and chipped away 2 small holes. In the first he placed 1 foot, tested it to see if it could take his weight, and then climbed to the next. So he rose, a few inches at a time, carving hand and footholds into the rock. The effort made his head spin and his limbs ache. Some way up, he stopped and clung to the rock to compose himself. Trying to control his breath, he stole a glance upward. How many clefts would he have to chisel away to get to the top? And how many before his knife broke? But there was no turning back. After a short rest, he steeled himself for a renewed ascent. Just then he heard laughter from above. He was too scared to lean back to look, so he kept his nose tight against the rock. The laughter continued and then stopped abruptly. Then a thick rope came down toward him and stopped just in front of his eyes.
"Tie the rope around your waist, and I'll pull you up."
It was the Taoist with the 3 buns. Relieved, Guo Jing put away his dagger and grabbed the rope with his right hand. He wrapped it around his waist twice and tied 2 knots.
"Is it secure?"
Yes.
"Is it secure?"
He had not heard Guo Jing's reply. Yes, Guo Jing called, this time louder. But he still had not heard.
"I forgot. You haven't trained your breathing enough. Your voice doesn't carry. If you've secured it, tug 3 times on the rope."
Guo Jing pulled sharply 3 times, and the rope instantly went taut. His body then started soaring up to the sky. The speed of it took him by surprise, and in a trice he had landed on his feet. There he was, the old Taoist. He had saved Guo Jing's life. The young man dropped to his knees to kowtow again, but the Taoist pulled him up.
"Enough, enough! You kowtowed more than enough times last time we met. You certainly know how to behave with your elders."
Guo Jing looked out across the flat expanse of snow. The Taoist pointed to 2 rocks shaped like drums.
"Sit."
Your student will remain standing, out of respect.
"You are not of my school, and I am not your shifu, so you are not my student. Sit."
Guo Jing was confused, but sat as instructed.
"Your shifus are well respected in the Wulin. I cannot claim an acquaintance, but I have heard many speak of their prowess. You need only learn the skills of one of them to gain a reputation in the martial world. You are working hard. Do you know why you have made so little progress over the last 10 years?
I'm too stupid. My shifus are doing all they can.
It needn't be so. It can only be because they do not know how to teach you.
Please, sir, I don't understand.
You already have a solid grasp of the basics. If we look only to the core martial arts, your current skills are far from inconsequential. But you lost your first real fight to the young Taoist Harmony Yin, and this made you question yourself. On this point, however, you are mistaken."
How does he know about that? Guo Jing wondered.
"He performed a somersault, yes, but he used tricks, not skill. Indeed, his mastery of the essentials does not necessarily exceed yours. With such accomplished shifus, I cannot teach you any more than they can."
Yes. Excellent, he thought. My shifus are masters of the martial arts. Then the problem does indeed lie with me.
"As your shifus have a bet going, they would be most displeased if I were to teach you. They care about honor above all else, and would not dream of profiting from any kind of unfair advantage."
What bet? Asked Guo Jing.
"You don't know? Then if your shifus haven't told you, you mustn't ask me. At some point over the next 2 years they will explain. You are an honest young man. We were fated to meet. Let me teach you some breathing techniques at least. How to sit, walk, and sleep, that sort of thing."
Sitting, walking, sleeping? Guo Jing thought to himself. I know how to do that already. But he decided not to say so, in case it made him look even more stupid.
"Brush away the snow from this rock and go to sleep."
This was certainly odd, Guo Jing thought, but he did as he was told.
Why I am teaching you this, you don't need to know. Focus on remembering these words instead. Clear heart, emotions departed. In empty body, qi can spread. A dead mind, yet the spirit lives. For yin thrives, but the yang is shed. In empty-bodied qi can spread, sorry. Guo Jing repeated and memorized it, but he had no idea what it meant. You must clear your mind before sleep. Don't leave a single thought. Then settle your body in the correct position, on your side, that's right. Make your breath smooth and even. Release your spirit, but don't let your mind wander. Guo Jing did as he was told. At first his mind was overrun by uncontrollable thoughts, but the Taoist's explanations were slow and thorough, and gradually he managed to focus on what he was being told. A warm feeling spread through his abdomen. The air at the top of the cliff was cold enough to cut bone, but he no longer felt it. After 2 hours he opened his eyes. He had been lying in meditation like this without feeling the slightest prickling of the hands or feet. The Taoist was sitting with his legs crossed in front of him. Noticing that Guo Jing was moving, he said, "Now you will be able to sleep." Guo Jing dozed off. By the time he awoke, the sun was beginning to rise in the east. The Taoist tied a rope around his waist and lowered him back down the cliff with instructions not to tell anyone about what had happened that night. That evening, Guo Jing returned to the cliff and was once again hoisted up. His mother did not think to ask why he was not returning at night, as the freaks frequently kept him out late, training. And so he spent his nights learning meditation with the mysterious Taoist. The 6 freaks were none the wiser. Four. It was strange, he had to admit. The Taoist had not taught him even one martial arts move, but he was noticeably quicker and lighter during his daily practices. 6 months on, he was performing moves with a skill and agility that had previously eluded him. He has finally matured, the 6 freaks could only exclaim. The Taoist taught him to climb the rock face by himself by moving the qi around his body, and only when Guo Jing was exhausted and could climb no more would he rush to the top and lower the rope. Before long, Guo Jing could manage all but the most difficult parts of the ascent. So the earth circled once more around the sun, and there were just a few months left before the day of the contest. It was going to cause a sensation in the Wulin, and the freaks of the south could talk of nothing else. They felt sure Guo Jing was going to win, given his recent progress, and their excitement at the thought of finally returning to their home in the south grew with each passing day. But they still had not explained to Guo Jing what exactly was going on. One morning, Gildan Quan turned to the boy. "Young man, you've been practicing with weapons a lot these last few months. I think we should concentrate on your boxing for a while." Guo Jing nodded. They arrived at their usual training ground, and Gildan Quan had just assumed his usual stance when a storm of dust suddenly rose before them, accompanied by the sounds of horses and someone shouting. A group of horses broke through the sand cloud, and their herders followed behind, struggling to retain control. Just as they had managed to get their animals to settle, a colt, dark red like blood, broke through, kicking and biting. This sent the rest of the horses into a frenzy, until it galloped away again. They watched as it returned and stirred up another uproar. The men were furious and tried desperately to capture it, but it evaded them, stopped, and began to proudly shake its mane. The herders could not help smiling. But as it approached for its third attack, one of the herders raised his bow and shot. Just as the arrow approached, the horse spun out of its path. The freaks and their disciple watched with growing fascination. Rider Han, who loved horses like life itself, had never seen such a magnificent steed. It surpassed even his own dear wind chaser. He ran over to the herders to ask if they knew anything about it. "He appeared a few days ago from deep in the mountains. We wanted to catch him, he's such a beauty, but it has proved impossible. We just ended up making him angry, so he's been chasing our animals ever since." "That's no horse,"
an older herder among them said solemnly. Rider Han looked at the old man in puzzlement.
"And what is it?"
A dragon sent from the heavens, that's what it is. Don't touch him. A dragon? Nonsense! Another herder replied. And what would you know? I've been herding horses since before you were born, and I've never seen anything like it. At that moment, the horse reappeared and started charging at the herd once again. Rider Han wasn't known as the protector of the steeds for nothing. He selected his spot and waited. There wasn't a horse in all his days that he had not managed to tame. Then, as it approached, he jumped. Just as he was about to land perfectly on its back, however, the colt shot forward like an arrow, and Rider Han fell to the ground. Furious, he started running after it, but his short legs could not carry him fast enough. Just then, a figure leaped through the air and caught hold of the young horse's mane. The animal accelerated in surprise, pulling the man with him. The crowd roared with applause. To the delight of the freaks, it was Guo Jing.
Where did he learn such impressive lightness kung fu?
Zhu Kong asked.
He's been making such progress recently, Jade Han replied. Maybe his dead father's spirit is helping him? Or fifth brother Zhang?
They still did not know anything about Guo Jing's secret nightly training in the art of breathing. While the Taoist had not taught him any moves, he had effectively been imparting the great art of Neigong inner strength, without Guo Jing ever even realizing it. Every evening, the young boy climbed up and down the cliff, itself a lesson in Golden Goose Kung Fu, one of the foremost branches of lightness technique. The boy was still as muddle-headed as ever, but he slept as per Uncle's instructions. The results of all of this were only ever made clear during Zhu Kong, Gildan Quan, and Jade Han's lessons. But the boy did not realize it himself, and the 6 freaks were merely delighted he was finally getting better. They did not imagine there might be a clandestine reason for his progress. But this made the freaks look at each other. They had not taught him that. The thought that he might have another Shifu was beginning, ever so slowly, to plant itself in their minds. Guo Jing had by now somersaulted onto the back of the horse and galloped away. Not long afterward they returned, the horse rearing wildly and bucking. It was all Guo Jing could do to squeeze his thighs and hold on. Rider Han began calling out instructions. The onlookers were astonished. The old herder knelt and began praying, begging the spirits not to punish them for offending the dragon horse. He then called to Guo Jing to jump off, but Guo Jing was concentrating too hard to hear him. It was as if he had tied himself to the animal. No matter how the horse bucked and cried, Guo Jing clung fast. Guo Jing was thus stuck, clasping on to the back of the horse for over 2 hours. Guo Jing, get down and let your third Shifu take over, Jade Han called.
No chance, Rider Han cried. All this hard work will have been for nothing if I take over.
This was a strong-willed young colt indeed, but whoever broke him would be his master for life. If Rider Han stepped in, the horse would never be tamed. Guo Jing was just as stubborn, but he was beginning to tire. His skin glistened with sweat. He slipped one arm around the horse's neck and embraced it tight. He then began to gather his inner strength to his arms and pulled tighter. The horse bucked and leaped with even greater force, but still the young man held on, his grip suffocating the steed. It had met his master. The animal stopped.
You've done it!
Rider Han called out in delight. Guo Jing was still scared to jump down in case the animal ran off.
Come, boy, Rider Han coaxed. You've tamed him. He's yours for good now.
Quietly, Guo Jing slipped back onto solid ground. The auburn horse stuck out its tongue and tenderly licked Guo Jing's hand. The crowd laughed. One of the herders tried to approach, but the horse kicked, sending him sprawling. Guo Jing led his proud colt to a nearby trough and cleaned him. "From now on, you will be called Ulan," Guo Jing whispered. The freaks decided that Guo Jing had earned himself a rest for the day, but they could not help feeling suspicious about their student's newfound skills. And as is marginally traditional, we've got an appendix reading to do. Starting... Oh, we've only got 2 today. Tomb Sweeping Day, which was way back at the beginning. Tomb Sweeping Day is an annual festival that falls on the 15th day of the spring equinox. Families take this day to remember their ancestors and recently deceased loved ones, whom they honor by cleaning their graves and praying to them. And then, rather more recently, Ulan, which is spelled Ulaan. So, again, as ever, I may be mispronouncing literally everything. And if you know better than I do, please, please, please do not hesitate. And Ulan, incidentally, is Mongolian for red, which is appropriate because it's a red horse. So that's nice. Alrighty, so that will do it for now, for this week. We will continue next week with the next chapter, where I think some familiar faces show up and some plot points come due. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Things get kind of interesting. This one is kind of a formative, important turning point where it's like, oh, Guo Jing actually isn't a talentless hack, but he is slow. He is decidedly slow. With persistence, he's capable, but everything is going to be an effort. And it kind of sets the tone going forward. We're going to have sort of a pattern going as a result. Okay, so yeah, I'm liking this. Basically, 1 chapter a week is working out pretty handily. We'll be done the book in... Oh, geez, how many chapters? I don't know. It'll still be a while. Come on, flip pages, Mo Gooder, please. Thank you. A couple more chapters. Like 4 more chapters, roughly. 4 more weeks. And then I've got an interesting one after that, which will be pretty short. Then maybe we'll do another one. I don't know. It's a fun series. It's a lot of fun. Consistently entertaining, even when some of the plot twists are like, wait, what? Where is this coming from? Huh? They're what? Oh, that's convenient. There's going to be a real convenient plot point that's going to happen right at the end that's going to have long-lasting impact on the rest of the series. But that's not spoiling anything. We'll get to that. But yeah, hopefully people enjoyed. I know I certainly did. I do this every Wednesday on what are now currently Wuxia Wednesdays. We are currently reading through A Hero Born, which is the first volume of the Legends of the Condor Heroes series by Jin Yong. Hopefully people are digging it. It's rather fun. And yeah, I have other streams throughout the week. I've got a Mecha Mondays stream where I read something giant robot related or mecha adjacent. Right now we're finishing up a science fiction double feature by Robert Heinlein called the first story of which was Waldo, and the second one is Magic Incorporated. So we're about a third of the way through Magic Incorporated. We'll get another third of the way through next Monday. And then Fridays, I also have a stream, Free Read Fridays, where I read short stories and indeed entire novels aloud. And this week we'll be starting on the short story collection Instantiation by Greg Egan. There's some good ones in there. Um, I've, I think, firmly established myself at this point as a pretty big Greg Egan fanboy. Um, I've read a fair number of his short story collections already on stream, and one of his novels. We'll probably do another one of his novels at some point as well, because they're all pretty good in one way or another. Although I have serious difficulty with some of his later ones. He gets increasingly high concept. He's high concept already, and it's like you sort of he's sort of an author that almost but not quite demands that you have some STEM background, um, for better or worse. But anyway, so yeah, to anyone listening to these after the fact, I do in fact do these live. That's why they're so rough. Starting at noon Eastern Standard Time, or U.S. East Coast time, uh, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So feel free to tune in and catch me live. If you don't tune in and catch me live, that's fine. They're all on my YouTube channel as well, which is probably where you're watching/listening to this. Anyway, okay, with that, I'm going to dip. Thanks again. Stay safe, stay sane, and be decent to each other. There might be a few things we can learn from Guo Jing in that regard. Alrighty, with that, I'm going to scooch. Bye-bye.